Today on Pilot's Discretion, Doug Ranley from Sporty's joins us to talk about pilot gear, the products that have changed flying, the ones that never made it, and the one he'd like to see invented. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Pilot's Discretion. I'm your host, John Zimmerman. Remember to visit sportys.com/podcast for today's show links, plus previous episodes. And we're always available by email. You can reach us at podcast@sportys.com. Today, I'm joined in the studio by my longtime colleague, Doug Ranley. He and I have worked together for over 20 years, and right now he leads product development for Sporty's. In that role, he's seen an awful lot of technology come and go. And I can tell you that as an Eagle Scout and a U.S. Army veteran, he has exceedingly high standards. He's been a pilot since he was a teenager and is a student of aviation history, which makes him a worthy competitor when he and I go plane spotting. Doug, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here.
So let's talk about new products and new technology, because sometimes aviation gets a bad rap for not innovating fast enough. And that might be true in piston engines maybe, but I don't think it's true for the gear most pilots carry. So when you think about the last couple decades of GA technology, what are some of those advances that maybe not enough people appreciate or that have changed the way we fly?
Well, I think you can identify really some amazing revolutions in aviation, and that has happened many times throughout our history here at Sporty's. In the recent, I'd say 25 years of Sporty's, I can identify about four of those main revolutions. And when I say revolutions, these are something that every pilot needs to have or wants to have. Maybe not every pilot has it yet, but it's definitely on the top of their list. The first one that comes to mind for me is A&R headsets. Mm-hmm. And when we went from passive to the magic of A&R, it was just a revolution in aviation that we've never seen before. A lot of pilots, once they start flying with A&R, can't go back to passive. And I completely understand why that is. One of my first introductions to A&R headsets didn't happen in aviation, believe it or not. It actually happened in my military career in Iraq. We're the National Guard, so we definitely don't get the latest and greatest stuff. We're driving deuce and a halves and 5 tons for Vietnam. So about 6 or 7 months into our deployment, all of a sudden a new Humvee arrives at our motor pool, and it's the commander's Humvee. So it's souped up with, armor that's supposed to be on there, not just a bunch of sheet metal cut by a bunch of rednecks. We had this amazing Humvee with all this armor, air conditioning, and lo and behold, an intercom system with Bose A&R headsets in the back. I remember opening the hatch of the Humvee in the very back and seeing these 3 Bose headsets there, and just like a choir of angels singing at the same time. When the first time we tried those things on in the Humvee going down the road, you could talk to each other without screaming, without having hurt ears. It was absolutely amazing. It changed the way we operated inside that one Humvee. All the other vehicles we had were still screaming and going deaf, but it was definitely a game changer. And apply that knowledge back to aviation. It's a game changer in aviation. To be able to effectively communicate with ATC as well as the other people in the aircraft, just phenomenal. So A&R headsets is at the top of my list when it comes to revolutions in recent aviation history.
And that's probably one that's overlooked. Most people instantly think about the latest and greatest, crazy technology. But I agree with you. That's amazing because almost everybody uses it. So it's pervasive. What else is on your list?
One of the things on my list is a small thing, but GPSs. I can recall back in the days, only 25 years ago, where we were using paper charts and trying to draw a line with a protractor and a highlighter to get from point A to point B, using stopwatches and all this stuff to effectively flight plan. When the first portable GPSs came out, you want to talk about a revolution. Having a map with a dot with my location on it, oh my goodness, that was awesome. Players like Lowrance, AvMap, Garmin, these guys that produced a moving map that I could put in front of my face and know precisely my location as I flew around. That was awesome. No longer did I have to bring out that sectional chart and block half my cockpit trying to figure out where in the world I was. I knew at all times exactly where I was. And that was huge in our market. Every pilot out there wanted to buy one of these portable aviation GPSs. and we sold a ton of them at Sporty's. We were all in on portable GPSs.
Yeah, I remember for a while there in, I guess, early 2000s, we had the Garmin 196, which was amazing. It was black and white. And they said, oh, we'll never be able to do a color screen. It's just not possible. And about 2 years later, there was a color screen version. It was the 296. And then a couple of years later, we thought, well, what are they going to do next? And the 396 came out, which to me, and I'd be interested if you agree, is one of those just transformational products that as soon as we heard the concept, I thought, well, this is going to change everything.
Well, and I'd say that's number 3 revolution. You could really divide those out because GPS, just having your position on a map is phenomenal. And now we're going to take weather, real live weather, and overlay it on top of that map. Oh my goodness. You want to talk about a game changer, taking the knowledge of what you can have with Nextrad, METARS, TAFs, live updated in the cockpit for us common pilots. Absolutely amazing. So weather is my number 3 when it comes to revolutions. We have headsets, in our headsets, we have GPSs, and then we have weather in the cockpit. And once we started flying with weather, again, we never went back. And even today, when we look at ADS-B receivers that provide all that weather data, it's something that almost all pilots fly with now. We don't want to go out there without having it.
It's interesting to me that all 3 of those that you've mentioned there are portables, or at least can be portable. And I think a lot of times the energy and attention and aviation world goes to a new airplane or a new engine technology or a new glass panel, which are all amazing and interesting, but somewhat rare. And why do you think it's so important? I mean, you mentioned this as common pilots. Tell me about what you mean there.
Well, it's easy to get caught up and go up market. You see a lot of people do that. A lot of companies do that. They get on the bottom end and then continue to go up market and kind of chase that dollar, chase the bigger airplanes, chase the bigger the sales volumes and whatnot. For us as Sporties, it's very important to keep grounded. When it comes to people coming into the market, trainers, student pilots, those guys that are just learning to fly right now, they're not buying that $2 million airplane right off the bat. They are renting. They're in this old 172 that barely runs, that gets off the field in 2,000 feet on a hot day. It's just, they're slogging it out. That's how you learn to fly. And that's kind of where Sporty's roots are, and that's where we've always been. These products that we talk about when it comes to portable really address that market, allow those pilots coming in the functionality and the information that you find in a lot of higher-end aircraft. So that's where the vast majority of our focus has been at Sporty's, and I think we've done a really good job at trying to bring really good information to that lower end of the market.
It makes me think of one of my favorite stories about technology is talking about World War II. Somebody once did an analysis, and everybody wants to talk about, rockets or the latest fighter airplane, but the most important technology in World War II was horses because millions of Russian soldiers, for example, had them, that more people had horses. And so that's really what mattered. It's kind of the same thing. For every one exotic new airplane, which we all dream of, if there's something everybody can have, that seems like that's more important.
I agree completely. A great example of that is this new Garmin Auto Land system that you find on all these really amazing planes. Great system. It's going to change aviation. Revolutionary? I'm not sure yet. It has a long way to go before it gets down to the market that we service. So giving somebody for under $1,000 something that could really change the way you fly, whether that's an ADS-B receiver with all the gadgets or an ANR headset that really makes you communicate better, is more of a revolutionary product than something that is reserved for just the upper end.
So maybe the ultimate everywhere product, because it's portable, because it's affordable, especially in the scheme of aviation, is the iPad. Where do you position the iPad? I mean, sort of brings together some of those pieces of the GPS receiver, the moving map, weather can be part of that. Is that our latest revolutionary period we're living through?
I think it is, and it might be one of the most important revolutions in Sporty's history as well. As we look at our market shift over time, we saw a lot of people move to the iPad early on. And we kind of had a fork in the road where we had to decide whether we're going to fully embrace this thing or are we going to continue to say that it's not safe for the cockpit and we need paper charts and we need Garmin GPSs and we need all this other stuff. I think the iPad was probably the biggest revolution in aviation in the recent history, and it's really opened up a whole lot of technology to that lower end of the market that we really service. So yeah, I think iPad is definitely at the top of the list when it comes to revolutions in recent aviation history for me.
So we talked about some winners there. Hard to disagree the day in our headsets, iPad have changed. Obviously, not every product's a home run. So, in your experience, do you have some swings and misses or a wall of shame? What are some examples that maybe seemed like a good idea but didn't pan out?
Failures are good. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. And we've certainly had our fair share of failures at Sporty's. Many of them are our own products, and some of them are other people's products. We could probably talk for days about the products that we failed on. And luckily, we've learned from those failures, and that's really important. But a couple that come to mind that were really big on my list were a few products we got in from other places. One was called the Aero Spoiler. If you recall this, John, this was back in early 2000s. This was a massive case. It was 3 feet long by 16 inches, maybe by a foot thick. I mean, it was a big case. And the idea here is if you have a plane parked on the ramp in the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and a hurricane's coming through, you want to prevent lift from happening on that wing. So these guys developed a product that used suction cups and these big spoiler brackets that were meant to prevent lift from happening on top of the wing of an aircraft, hence keeping it on the ground. I recall picking this thing up, and we got in the first shipment, and we put it online, and every single news agency out there at the time picked up our press release. It was amazing. We're talking Flying Magazine, Plane and Pilot, Private Pilot at the time. Every magazine out there picked up the Aero Spoiler because they thought it was a neat idea. And we thought it was a neat idea as well. But you know who didn't think it was a neat idea? Our customers. It was one of the few products in Sporty's history that we did not sell a one. Like zero, like absolute dud, goose egg. It was terrible. And I kept looking back at all these magazines and places that picked up our press release and thinking, all this marketing, how can this not be successful? And that was the lesson I think we learned at that time is you can have all the marketing in the world. First off is the product. The product solved a problem that did not exist. At the end of the day, am I going to worry about my 172 parked on a ramp in the Caribbean when a hurricane's coming through? Is it that big of a deal for me to want to prevent lift from happening on top of a wing? And the answer was no. And I think our customers echoed that exact same answer. So the biggest lesson from Aerosport that I can remember was, hey, product comes first. Marketing, it's definitely important, but it's not number one on our list.
Yeah, it's a great lesson. Solve a problem that actually exists. We sometimes see that these days with software that I sometimes see a new startup company. I think that's a great idea. It looks like that solves a problem one person had. So. How about in the world of like avionics? I mean, we sometimes see big splashy gadgets that seem kind of interesting, but don't always work out. A lot of smart people behind them, but are there examples there where products seemed interesting, seemed exciting, and just didn't go?
Sure. The one that really sticks out in my mind was a Garmin GPSCom back in the 90s, I think, when they brought this thing out. And it was really revolutionary at the time. We're going to take a GPS and combine it with a radio. So the idea is not only can I navigate via GPS, but I can also communicate on a radio in the event of emergency. But technology was changing so fast at this time that GPSs became outdated pretty quick. So by the time Garmin figured out to put this all together, its technology wasn't as good as the next GPS unit. So it's kind of clunky in the realm of navigational GPS. Well, on the other side, it was a radio too, a VHF kind of marine style radio. And it didn't do that well either. It was a kind of a mediocre GPS and a mediocre radio that they duct taped together and hoped would sell thousands of them. And pilots quickly, I think, saw through that. And the complexities of having both those in one unit was worse than having dedicated units separate. So I think pilots went to having just GPSs and just radios instead of having a GPS radio combination, which makes sense in my mind as well.
That's a great example. I remember that product. And to me, the modern version of that might be the flying car, which is, neither a good car nor a good airplane, but it's crammed together.
And that was one of those lessons learned earlier on, too, was try to keep it simple. Like when you put too much stuff onto one device, I think pilots quickly forget about all those other features. A great example of that here recently at Sporty's was our PJ2Com radio. As we move along further and further down the line of navigating via iPads and GPSs, it just makes so much more sense to have a dedicated comm-only radio. And removing all the complexities of VOR, ILSs, localizers has really made a home run on a radio of our PJ2Com. Simplicity is king in our industry, and we see that every day.
Yeah, anybody who works around Sporties knows that Doug is famous for this. Somebody will come up and say, hey, what if we added this to that radio? And the answer, nope, nope, we're going to stay focused. Yep. So what would you say your current batting average is, Doug, when a new product shows up and here's a sample of it, here's the pitch, and you look at it and you say, yeah, it's going to work, or no, that's not going to work. What do you think your batting average is right now?
I like to think my batting average is really good. The bad thing about it is you don't know if the bad products that you rejected are going to work. Maybe you see them at some competitors and hopefully they're selling for a while and then they disappear and you think in your mind that, hey, we were right. But oftentimes you'll find a product that comes in and maybe we reject it that maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe we should have tried something that is a little bit on the fringe. So it's hard to put a batting average on. I like to think we're really, really good at what we do, and we've been doing it for so long that we kind of see the trends and what's going to work and what's not. So I like to think we're in the upper 80% of getting things right, but in reality, I bet we're closer to that 50-50 mark.
Doug, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with some more questions.
Introducing the next generation portable ADS-B receiver from 4Flight. Sentry Plus includes all the safety features pilots love about its predecessor, including subscription-free data link weather and a built-in carbon monoxide detector, but adds an industry-leading 18-hour battery life and a first-of-a-kind OLED data display with live flight metrics. Its high-performance track log recorder ensures you never lose a flight, with automatic on-device logging and importing to 4Flight, further enhanced with new G-load tracking for both in-flight reference and post-flight debriefing. Sentry Plus is the all-in-one iPad upgrade that will make your next flight safer and more comfortable. For more information, visit sporties.com/Sentry. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion.
We're back with Doug Ranley. And Doug, you talked about, the batting average, and sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. What do you look for there? I mean, how do you know if a product is going to work or not? Is it all gut feel? Is it, go do market research? What's your process?
There's two sides to every product. And one side is the product itself and the other side is the business side. And first and foremost, as we discussed earlier, it has to be the product first. When we look at a product, we want to make sure that product, number one, solves a problem or it does something better. It doesn't need to solve a problem that doesn't exist. We've seen many products that come to our door that tries to solve something that we really don't have that problem in our industry. And then the next thing we really want to look at is how that product has been developed and tested. It's amazing to see how many people will develop an item and put it in a laboratory and do all this testing, but never fly with it. In our market, we fly Cessnas, Cirrus, Beechcraft, Piper, you name it, all the planes that are out there. And to have a product in our market that has never been in an airplane just makes no sense. Real-world testing is probably the most important thing you can do for a new product in aviation. So there's a product side of course, does it solve a problem? Is it designed well? Is it built well? Is it going to last? And then related to that is the business side of it. You can have the best thing in the world, but if you don't have the marketing and margins and profit stuff behind that, it's not going to get the market either. So it's one thing to design an amazing product, but we also have to keep everybody happy in the process. We have to keep the manufacturers making it happy. They have to make enough money on it, enough profit. You got to keep the guy selling it happy. So they're making profit. They're not getting a massive amount of returns or customer service complaints. And last but certainly not least, number one is you got to make the customer happy. The customer must think they're getting a great value and appreciate the amount of work and effort you put into making a good product. And when you can make all those people happy and have a really great product, you're going to have success. When one of those things is out of whack, doesn't matter which one, the product is probably not going to be around too long.
What product do you wish somebody would invent right now?
Oh, wow. We've done all this thing in portable aviation, in essence, to replace panel avionics. When you look at ADS-B receivers and GPSs, we're replacing navigators that cost $20,000. We're replacing XM receivers in the panel. We're replacing all this stuff. Even attitude indicators, gyros, all these things have been replaced by an iPad in a little $800 box. I think the next invention that I think is going to revolutionize aviation is going to have to be further replacing more of that panel. So the things we're missing right now, of course, are pitot-static inputs when it comes to airspeed, because you can only do so much with ground speed, right? Mm-hmm. We still need that airspeed indicator out there. And then more importantly is the VHF radios in the cockpit. We're still using World War II technology to communicate to ATC. The big guys have switched over to CPDLCs and a lot of datacom stuff. I think as we move down this path, replacing those radios in our standard 172s is going to be the next big thing in aviation. So I hope somebody invents the way to replace the rest of that panel that we've already replaced.
Yeah, boy, sign me up for that. We had Tyson Weiss on a couple episodes ago, and one of his suggestions was related to picking up IFR clearances at remote airports, like Sporty's. And
sure.
The whole method of taxiing to the right spot on the ground and dialing up this frequency and listening over a scratchy radio for release time. Just one example of that communication process with ATC that has not evolved quite as quickly as some of our other technologies.
I look at all that information we have in our cockpits and all that information that certainly ATC has as well, that has to be able to communicate back and forth somehow, some way to make flying that much more efficient, quicker, and safer.
All right, so that's something you'd like to see invented. Is there a product you wish people would stop inventing?
Well, you kind of mentioned earlier, flying cars. Flying cars didn't work 60 years ago. They don't work today. And I might go to my grave saying this, but we have yet to see a flying car that's going to replace something in our garage. They're neither a good airplane nor a good car. The thought of me taking my $350,000 flying car to Walmart for a loaf of bread just boggles my mind. There's no way I would ever want to do that. And also for the quality of vehicle you get with that $350,000 right now is it's not a good airplane. It's not a good car. So I'd much rather buy a good airplane and buy a good car before I went down that path. Along those same lines, we got to talk about VTOLs a little bit, because VTOLs is kind of the modern flying car, but without the car part. The whole idea of all this money being poured into electric aviation so I can remotely take these helicopter-like vehicles and just fly across the country is absolutely astounding. I think the VC money that goes into VTOLs, I hope they get some of that into aviation somehow, some way. That we can take those electric engines that they're developing, hopefully that battery technology, and put them into real airplanes for real pilots. I don't see myself hopping in my backyard in a VTOL and coming to Sporty's to work. It's not in my future, probably.
All right, Doug, let's go to history a little bit, because we're talking about the latest and greatest there. But as I mentioned earlier, you're a bit of an aviation history buff. And one of your favorite things to do when you and I are at Sporty's together is an airplane taxis up on the ramp in front of the building, and we have 5 seconds to name the airplane, and bonus points if you can get the specific model year and things like that. So give me the Doug Ranley aviation history nerd. If you land at an airport you've never been to before, you looking up the history, you looking for the vintage airplane that's hidden around, how do you scratch that itch?
Well, a good itch to scratch at every airport is Google Maps to start. Cartography and the overview of an airport is a great starting point for me when I go to a new place. And then finding the history of that area is just kind of a nerd thing I like to do. Whether you're going to Piqua or Troy, Ohio, with Waco and Hartzell, all these really amazing companies in aviation that have revolutionized some of the aircraft design. You can really find some great museums and some off the beaten path historical things at our market that really is great to explore. Even up in Port Clinton, up in Sandusky, there's some really cool museums up there too that have unique things wherever you go. So I would say start with Google Maps as your airport destination, and then just dive into every point of interest from there.
Yeah, great point about don't forget your backyard too. Sometimes people get all fired up about the far off museum or something, but maybe we're spoiled in Ohio, but there's so much great aviation history in your backyard if you just look hard enough. So
there sure is, and there's also aviation history when you're flying cross country. Don't forget you don't have to land to experience history. Many of these really neat places are on the way to certain destinations. So flying over something that's really cool sometimes could be just as cool as actually landing and checking it out. A great thing for one of my trips in aviation, we're flying the Hudson River corridor, and that's something you really can't experience from the ground. But the amount of history that's flowing down that Hudson River, the amount of immigrants that came on Ellis Island, circling the lady at the very end of the river, it was just breathing history, and that was a lot of fun. So don't forget to experience history on the way to the destination, not just at the destination itself.
All right, Doug, you know what's coming next. It's time for our Ready to Copy segment. So I'll throw out some questions on a wide variety of topics, and since I know you pretty well, they will be a wide variety of topics. And you give me your quick answer. Are you ready to copy?
I'm ready to copy. Fire away.
I'm not going to ask you your favorite airplane because I'm pretty sure it's the RV-12. So why do you love that airplane so much?
What's not to love? I mean, 110 knots at 3.9 gallons per hour of MOGAS at that point. I mean, it's by far the perfect airplane for a lot of people out there. So I'm a big fan of the RV-12. I spent a couple years in it here at Sporty's while we were having some, and I probably have over 100 hours in them, and it's by far my most favorite. The visibility is amazing. If you do formation flight, which we've done many times, it's certainly the best aircraft I've ever had for formation flight. Very responsive, quick, and it does everything I want to do and more. Can't wait to fly one again.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in the new RV-15 taildragger?
I will give it a 7. Taildraggers are neat. Don't get me wrong. Backcountry flying is amazing. It's not the center of my bullseye. So I am definitely interested, but I'm not geeked out. I'm not going to worship the Oshkosh booth up there when it rolls out.
You have tested hundreds, probably thousands of flashlights over the years. You are the official flashlight tester. Most of them have failed your test. What's your biggest pet peeve about flashlights for pilots?
Quit making them brighter. Oh my!
So tell me why. So most flashlights is all about being bright. It's about 1 billion lumens. Why is too bright bad?
Surefire was all about this probably 15 years ago. It's 200 lumens. It's 250 lumens. It's 300 lumens. They just kept making it brighter and brighter and brighter. Well, when you're in the cockpit at night and you flip on your flashlight, are you really happy that it's 5,000 lumens? In the cockpit for aviation, a bright flashlight is worthless. It's absolutely worthless. I don't need a backup landing light. I need something that I can see around my cockpit and operate inside. So you have to have this balance of a bright white light for pre-flight, but yet still something inside the cockpit that's nice and light and dim. So a lot of the flashlights you'll find at Sporty's are specifically designed such that they have lower, dimmer options on them. They can be bright. You can have a 200 lumen outside bright light for pre-flight, but when you get inside that cockpit, you really need to dim it down and not blind the crap out of yourself when you're looking around the cockpit. So, flashlights are very frustrating because every Tom, Dick, and Harry sends in a new flashlight that's 1,500 lumens. That's 2,000 lumens, and we can go down another path of why lumen ratings are completely crap. But at the end of the day, flashlights in the cockpit do not need to be that bright.
What's your favorite little flying accessory? Not a fancy Bose headset or something, but some little product that just makes life easier.
Kneeboards. This sounds really simple, but kneeboards are a big thing of what we do at Sporty's, and we need some place to put that revolutionary device, the iPad, right where I can see it. And a kneeboard is a cheap, inexpensive way to just keep that on my lap exactly where I need it. So I'm a big fan of kneeboards, and that is reflected in our product offerings because we have a lot of kneeboards at Sporty's.
You're a true connoisseur of the $100 hamburger, or probably more accurately, the $100 breakfast. What's your favorite place to do that?
If I had to pick one place in the world, it would be Portsmouth, Ohio. PMH has the best biscuits and gravy in the world, and I'll go to my grave saying that probably.
All right, we're obviously going outside aviation here towards the end. And in addition to being a connoisseur of $100 hamburgers, I learned that you are also a connoisseur of 90s country music. I learned this the hard way when you and I flew a 172 from California to Ohio many years ago. So who's the most underrated artist from that era? Who should I put back on my Spotify playlist?
Ooh, underrated artist. You know, I've been listening to Clint Black a lot lately, so I would put him on your list to put into the rotation. I'm a big fan of Clint Black.
Some more great Doug Ranley trivia is that when you were young, you spent a summer as a carny, traveling around with an eclectic mix of people. This is a ridiculous stretch on my part, but I'm the host. I get to do it. What is a skill you learned as a carny that is applied to aviation?
Wow, that is out there. So yes, I spent a summer in Carneyville, as we might call it, being a food service vendor, a neighboring town over from where I grew up in. A couple teachers were off for the summer, and they have a bunch of food trailers. So I was 15 years old and responded to an ad in a newspaper. Yes, we had newspapers back then. And my parents were naive enough to let me do it. So I spent a summer traveling around Ohio at fairs and festivals selling fried vegetables, sleeping in a camper, and it was definitely an interesting experience, to say the least. The thing I learned in that could be applied to aviation, I would say, is always be flexible. Every day was something new, and it was one of these things where the job had to be done. You started at 8 a.m. and you went till midnight or 1 o'clock whenever it was over. And whether it was raining, whether it was thunder, lightning, whether there was an unruly crowd, whether it was really slow, no matter what was going on, the job had to be done. So always complete the job at hand and make it happen, whatever it takes. So I'll take that from my carny experience.
That's a pretty good lesson. I'll take it. Our last question is always the same, Doug. You have one final flight, and we want to know, what are you flying and where are you going?
Well, you know my love for the RV-12, so I'm going to take the RV-12. I'm going to depart my favorite airport, Indy 69 Sporty's here at Claremont County, Ohio. I'm going to head north. I'm going to keep it low. I'm going to fly under Martha's Bridge between climbing out and then heading over to the front range of the Rocky Mountains. I'm going to fly north on the Alaska Highway all the way to Denali and hit all those national parks that are so much easier to see and experience via the airplane. And I think that the perfect ending to that trip would be landing in Talkeetna there, exiting the plane, walking down the ramp, and hopefully there's a student pilot there ready to take the keys and throw them and say, hey, have a good time. And here we go.
Doug, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporty's Pilot Shop, training and equipping pilots worldwide for over 60 years. For more episodes and links to additional information, visit sportys.com/podcast. And if you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.